Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to The Point. Unfortunately, we were supposed to be in the big room, so apologies for the lack of space. Some housekeeping rules before we begin. We're not expecting the fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, please leave the building through the exits and the fire exits and meet outside of the fire assembly point on the recreation ground. Councillors must keep their masks on unless they are speaking, but are encouraged to keep them on even then to comply with COVID guidance. As a reminder to councillors and members of the public that this meeting is being live streamed. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. The members of the public that are registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. Have we got the lighting system? We've got a lighting system, so when the light is amber, they have 30 seconds remaining. People wishing to speak on an agenda item are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, however, it's not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruption, we do have the power under the Council's Constitution to remove people from the meeting or continue in private, neither of which we take lightly or wish to do so. Okay. Laura, have we any apologies for absence? No. Thank you. Members, do any members have any declarations of interest they want to make? If so, please indicate now, and when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. You can, of course, declare any interests as they occur to you in the meeting.
Yes, Chair, I do. On agenda item 8, relating to traffic regulations in Stoneham Lane at St Nicholas Church, I have to declare an interest because I'm a member of the Parochial Church Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Irish. Now on to item 3, to consider minutes of the meetings held on the 22nd of March 2021 and the 25th of March 2021. Can I now sign the minutes of the meeting on these dates as a true record? Do I have a proposer? Oh, sorry, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got some amendments that I would like to the minutes, please. On page 3 of the minutes, but page 11 of the actual document. About the reasons that we rejected or were not inclined to go with the officer's advice. I don't think it fully captures everything that we said. So I think additionally we need to put in there that we said that the economic case had not been adequately substantiated. We expressed our concerns about the impact on health and well-being of residents, particularly school children, those experiencing social deprivation, those experiencing mental health issues, and those, of course, with respiratory diseases. We also were concerned about the credibility of the claims by the airport that it would close without the runway extension. We were concerned about air quality on Southampton Road, which was obviously an air quality management area. We expressed our concern about the failure to take into account the economic disbenefits. We also raised the issue of the insufficiency of the health fund. And in relation to noise, it wasn't just obviously the impact on residents, but also we were concerned about the impact on our green spaces because a lot more of them were being affected by noise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Campbell, the minutes, you've already approved the minutes as chair of the meeting? That's what I'm being told. Okay, we'll carry on. We'll defer the signing of the minutes then to the next meeting. Okay, does anyone have any comments on the meeting of the 22nd? If not, could I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Bicknell. And thank you, Councillor Irish, for seconding. So, if you agree, could you raise your hand? Thank you, councillors. Those minutes are passed. Section 4. Members of the public can participate during this section of the meeting, and I now invite Simon Payne to ask his question. Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Okay, Chair, councillors. As many down the Lakeside allotment, the access down there. As many you may know, the access to Lakeside allotments is through Rapide Close. As part of the traffic order for Lakeside, it was planned that double yellow lines would be put opposite the entrance gates to allow for access. When the double yellow lines were painted back in April 2018, there was actually an abandoned car there, so actually the lines didn't ever get painted, and to date they still haven't ever been done. Now what's actually been happening more and more recently, and in May this occurred as well, is that people are now actually parking right in front of the gates as well. So people are actually having to open the opposite gates. Now the whole are now all damaged, probably beyond repair. It has all been reported in, but nothing's been fixed yet since that point. Please can we ask that we get those gates looked at urgently. Obviously it is a safety matter now with people moving those. They are big gates. Can also something be done around these line markings, and possibly even if it's possible to even put something like no parking actually on the road there, because it's actually causing a real issue getting in and out of there now. Any member, if you want to at all, we can arrange a site visit to actually show you, the cars going in and out of there, what the issues are. Okay. And just the second point I'd just like to raise is just around street scene, trees and weeds. Probably many of you on here are members of Eastleigh Neighbours. You probably saw the post yesterday around the trees where they're all getting overgrown everywhere. Now that's actually quite a common issue across the borough. We're actually seeing it, and again the other thing we're also seeing is all the weeds around the pavements and in the gutters. It feels like the street scene team are either not getting enough resource, or actually they've been diverted anywhere else. It just feels a little bit unloved around here at the moment. Just wonder if that's going to be the case, or will it be addressed soon? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. With regards to the gate and the yellow lines, I will personally follow that up and look into that. With regards to the weeds, unfortunately, you're right, it is not enough resource. Eastleigh Borough Council carry out this service on behalf of Hampshire County Council. It used to be done twice a year, but unfortunately, cuts have said that we can only do it now once a year. So, unfortunately, budget cuts have meant that the weeds aren't being treated as often as, of course, we would have liked. I think regards to trees, etc., I think that might be a different issue, and again, I'll look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. There is no one else registered to speak, so thank you. That concludes public participation. Now move on to the Chair's report. Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honoured to have been elected as Chair of this committee. I'd like to thank Councillor Campbell, who chaired this committee through some very tough meetings over the past year. She will be a very hard act to follow. I thought I'd get away with a gentle start, but looking at the agenda, this might not be the case. As this is our first committee meeting since the local elections, I would like to offer congratulations to our new member, Councillor Park, and to Councillor Irish for his re-election. I would also like to thank the council officers who have worked very hard to accommodate our meetings, which now have to be face-to-face because of government legislation. So whilst MPs can still dial into meetings, councillors are not allowed to, and all public meetings must be in public now. And we must observe COVID guidelines. I was delighted to be invited to open the Mini Fairy Festival and Trail at Pavilion on the Park on Sunday the 30th of May. The weather was beautiful and many families enjoyed the trail and the entertainment, raising vital funds for the Sensory for All project. Over 800 residents applied for our fruit tree scheme and 200 vouchers were issued. Sorry to those who missed out, but it was a brilliant response and I hope that this committee looks again to do this in the future. It was great to be invited to the Pirelli Play Park to meet the architects to show them the finished park a couple of weeks ago. Fantastic benches have been installed as well as resurfacing of the footpaths and the planting of trees around the perimeter. Following the press release, I was contacted by a former worker on the site who kindly sent me an aerial photograph of the Pirelli factory. The gentleman completed 53 years of service at the company. What a magnificent achievement. The paddling pool is being prepared to reopen. We hope that the paddling pool will be reopened when central government. So the earliest date would be June the 21st. However, the pool chemicals are then added to the pool that needs to rest before use. So please, if members of the public see that the gates are locked, this is for a reason and that the water is not safe to use. I was very pleased this week to see that the summer social events have restarted at the point, and I hope to get along there very soon to be able to sample the atmosphere and most definitely the beer. Pop-up events, music on the bandstand and even yoga are taking part over the next coming weeks. I'd like to finish by congratulating Eastleigh FC on a good season in the National League. Commiserations on just missing out on the playoffs. Season tickets have gone on sale this week and I urge all local football supporters to get one of the frozen price tickets and support our local football team. Thank you. So item 6, I'd like to invite Liz Harrison to give a presentation on planning guidelines.
Thank you, Chair. Shall I? Yeah. So this is a brief presentation setting out the planning guidelines to give members a refresh in advance of the planning application that's before you tonight. As you'll be aware, proposals have to be considered on planning grounds, and the committee must determine proposals in line with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Our current adopted local plan is the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan Review 2001 to 2011, and it sits alongside the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan. As you'll be aware, progress is being made on the replacement local plan, and the Council at the end of May have resolved to adopt the main modifications and to put them out for public consultation, which will be happening shortly. So it's now considered that this new local plan is very far advanced and that significant weight can be given to the policies and the draft allocations within it. So in addition to the local plan, you also have other relevant material considerations that need to be taken on, and these include the adopted supplementary planning documents, which cover a variety of issues, including quality places, residential parking, planning obligations. And then, in addition, you've got the national guidance set out in the National Planning Policy Framework with its presumption in favour of sustainable development. It, again, is a material consideration of significant weight that takes precedence over development plan policies that do not accord with the National Planning Policy Framework. As briefly indicated, it seeks to achieve a number of things, including the delivery of sustainable development, boosting of housing delivery and economic growth. It has a presumption in favour that consists of 3 strands related to economic, social and environmental issues. Other material planning considerations can consist of things such as the planning history, appeal decisions, site-specific policies, and then site-specific matters such as highways, infrastructure, drainage, biodiversity, etc. Then also to be taken into consideration the consultee responses and any third-party comments we've received from interested residents. Issues of case law and precedent can be relevant depending on the particular application in front of us. There are various issues we can't take into account. Here's a list of them, but they include issues such as property prices, loss of a private view, and personal matters, and things that are covered by other legislation. So there are two types of planning applications, a one-step process, which is a full application where all the information is submitted and all matters are to be considered and determined. The other approach, which is what we will see tonight, is that it forms an application. Firstly, you have an outline application which is there to establish the principle. And then you would, if outline planning permission is granted, you would then get a reserved matters application, which it is at that stage that the detail of the layout and the access, scale, appearance and landscaping would be finalised. Sometimes some of these issues are set out at the outline stage, and I'll come on to that later during the course of the application. But you have either a full application or an outline and reserve matters. And then if conditions are attached to any of these permissions, you have to have further applications to discharge those conditions. And we have to consider whether otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable through the use of conditions. But these do have to meet the tests set out in the government guidance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now would you like to present your report? Thank you.
Application for you is for land west of Albrook Way in Knoll Hill, Eastleigh. It's an outline application for up to 52 units, residential units, with associated landscaping, infrastructure and access. All the matters are reserved except for the access. So the application before you is to consider the principle of developing the site for 52 residential units, and for the creation of the new access. You'll recall that this was last before members back in March, on the 22nd of March, where members resolved to defer the determination of the application for consideration to be given as to whether or not a play area could be accommodated on site in lieu of payments towards off-site improvements at the nearby existing play area. So this is the site before you. It's edged in red. As you can see here, you've got Albrook Way to the east. You've got Knoll Hill down here on the west, and the existing property, Westfield House, is excluded from the development site. You've also got the public right-of-way, which runs along here to the west of the site. Oh, sorry, I thought my cursor was showing on the screen. Apologies. So just to put it into more context, here is the aerial photograph. So you can see the boundary vegetation there. That's all to remain and will be looked to be enhanced in particular locations. And in addition, we'll come on to, there's proposed additional planting within the development site as well. But the area to the west is also protected outside of the development site, is the site of importance for nature conservation with its own protection that brings with it, but it's not within the application site. Again, you can see within the sort of southern part of the site, the existing property is excluded from the development site, but you can also just about see down at the southern end the small cluster of buildings associated with the grazing of the land at present. And it's in that location that the new access is proposed, in the approximate position of the existing field gate access, but it will be an improved access, obviously, to accommodate the residential development. So here are some site photographs. That's the field gate access. You can see some of the buildings associated with the paddock use. The top right-hand photograph is the entrance drive to Westfield House, and the existing public right-of-way does actually cross over the official definitive route does actually cross that driveway, but at present people are generally using a route just off to the left-hand side of the drive to connect up with the route as it's going north-south towards along the western boundary of the site. So the bottom photographs are taken from that public right-of-way. The bottom left-hand one is looking north, and you can see the boundary vegetation in the distance. And the bottom right-hand one is looking south, and again you can just see Westfield House there. And you can see the views that you get out to the east, and as we'll see on the parameter plans and the indicative layout coming shortly, it has been designed to retain some of those longer distance views through, across to the east. Just more contextual photographs. So this is top left hand is the entrance to Knoll Hill. And as you'll see at the present, there aren't any pavements, but we'll come on to that in due course because the proposal does include for a new footway access along Knoll Hill to connect into Albrook, to connect to the surrounding footpath to the south. The top right hand corner you have got the southern boundary of the site, and you can just about see the footpath marker sign in the centre of the photograph, and that's the current route, which isn't the one that's walked but would be re-established as part of this proposal. Bottom left hand photograph, you've got the roundabout, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, and you can just see there off to the left hand side the entrance to Knoll Hill. And then bottom right, you've got the view taken from the lay-by, looking towards the site in a sort of northwesterly direction. And you can see some of the existing boundary treatment, which is thinner at the southern end and lower, but has more trees to the northern end. So just before we get on to the proposals, just to let you know, there are some updates to the written report that's before you this evening. We have now had the response from Environmental Health, and they are satisfied that a condition that the outstanding issues can be resolved by a condition requiring further noise assessment to be submitted with any reserved matters application, which would then reflect the exact layout that was being put forward and make sure any mitigation measures were specifically designed to the proposed layout. We've also had the updated parameter plans sent in, which now correspond with the indicative layout plan. So that affects bullet point 1 and 2 on the recommendation on the first page of the report. And we also, as a result of receiving the amended parameter plans, we will be able to amend conditions 1 and 4 to reflect those revised numbers. And then, as I mentioned in the planning guidelines presentation, full council did resolve on the 27th of May to approve the modifications to the emerging local plan for public consultation. And within that, as you will be aware, this site is allocated for residential development. And that continues in the modifications. The modifications did not affect the site in terms of the principle of the development. So coming on to the principle of the development, the site is within the existing local plan, the designated country the site is proposed to be allocated for residential development in the emerging local plan. And given the stage we're at, it is considered that considerable weight can be given to those policies such that they are a significant material consideration in the determination of this application. In allocating a site, it does mean that it would become part of the realigned urban edge and would therefore no longer be in the countryside or the local gap. So coming on to the parameter plan, you have seen the parameter plan previously back in March. It is very similar apart from the addition of the star to the bottom. It's the slightly more purpley one, I think it's appearing on screen. That is the proposed location of the play area. So it has been possible to get a play area on site. You will have seen from the report, and I will show you the slight difference in the indicative layout, that it has resulted in a reduction from 53 units to 52 in order to get the play area on site. But it is considered that it can be accommodated satisfactorily within that southern area of open space, which was already previously proposed, but they have had to realign the southern units in order to create the space 30-metre separation distance from the nearest residential property to a play area to ensure that there isn't too much noise and disturbance for the nearest residents. So the parameter plan otherwise is as you saw before, but that indicates where the play area will be proposed. The dotted sort of orange line is the route of the public right-of-way that we talked about before, and you can see where we've got an east-west green links that are being proposed as part of the landscape strategy for the site. You've also got within the site sustainable drainage, so that also brings with it, that's an undeveloped part of the site, which brings with it biodiversity benefits through the vegetation that's associated with that. So this is the previous layout that members saw back in March, and if you focus, it is a little bit like Spot the Difference. If you focus on the southern end, you've got the, in blue, a sort of square rectangular blue, that's the attenuation basin, and then you had 2 units facing towards the area of open space. If I now click to the left one, if you keep looking at the southern part of the site, you'll see in yellow, that's now showing where the play area could go. And that is the size of the required size for a play area. And you'll see, I can flip back if you want me to, but you will see that the nearest houses have pushed slightly further north, and the nearest 2 are just to the east of the tree line there. And there is no longer the 3rd house that was shown in that previous location to the southeast of Westfield House. So that's the change before you compared to last committee. And if you can just about see a dotted circular line, that is the 30-metre distance around the outside of the play area. Other than that, it is as before. The sort of blue hatching along the western side, that is the easement for the water main that runs through the site. So obviously that development can't come within a certain distance in order to protect that. And there are conditions to ensure that details of the protection measures for that during construction would be provided. Again, as you can see on the indicative layout, they've got some east-west links of additional tree planting to supplement the existing trees around and vegetation around the outside. Just to remind members, the properties are range in the majority are 2-storey height, apart from the 3 bungalows you can see. Oh, it is shown now up here. These are the bungalows that are proposed. So you've got a mix of bungalows, detached, semi-detached, and 2-storey in majority, apart from the few bungalows at the top. And I will just check. And yes, and the mix is from 1 bed to up to 4 bed properties. It does provide for 35% affordable housing. With the change in number of units on the site, that has reduced down by 1 unit to 18 units, because previously it was a requirement for 18 point, I can't remember, but more than 0.5, and so we rounded up to 19, and now it's 18.2, so we have to round down to 18 units. But it is 35%, and our colleagues in housing are content that it meets the requirements of the policy in that regard. Oh, also in regard to you will have seen in the report as well, it is mentioned that the land to the west is going to be brought into woodland management. So there is details in the conditions for, in the 106 head terms for a woodland management plan to be required. And so again, that's another benefit from the scheme in terms of the future management and maintenance of that area. Just while we've still got the layout in front of you, I can confirm, as you'll have seen in the reports, that colleagues in landscape and urban design have been consulted on this throughout and have been involved in the various amendments to the scheme, and both teams have confirmed they've got no objection to the proposals that are in front of you. Obviously, the development of the site will change the character of it from currently undeveloped to a developed site, as is the case with any greenfield development. But it has been through a landscape impact assessment, and that has concluded that any impacts are localised, and because of the surrounding topography and the surrounding vegetation from the woodland, there are actually quite limited views of the site from the surrounding area. And in terms of the impact on the gap, obviously there will be a physical reduction in land that is currently allocated, designated as gap, albeit the draft allocation proposes to bring that out of the countryside and the gap. The modifications have also removed the gap allocation, the gap designation, or proposing to remove the gap designation of the surrounding land, but that is something that was approved by full council at the end of May as part of the modifications, and that was something that the inspector had specifically asked for a gap review to be undertaken. So the allocation was always going to take it out of the gap, but just for clarity and completeness, the land around it is no longer considered to be necessary to be included in the gap, mainly because the surrounding land has its own protection by nature of the sink designation and the extensive tree coverage. So that gives it its own coverage, its own protection from development. And generally, gap land is more open and less tree covered and wooded, because you're looking at that sort of openness and when you're looking at gap designations. So I think that covers everything on that slide. Apologies, I've lost my cursor now on this screen. There we go. So coming on to the access, as you saw before from the photograph, there's the existing field access which will be improved to accommodate the junction. It is thought that the priority here would need to change so that actually the new development has priority over the land. Sorry, the orientation is a little bit awkward on this one. It's angled slightly further, sort of northwest. It should really be further north. But so the existing units on Knoll Hill would have to give way to this development, because the development traffic levels from the proposed development would be higher. So that would be covered through road markings as part of the site. But that's something that the County Council have suggested needs to be done to ensure highway safety there. As is usual on junctions, the priority is given to the higher trafficked route, which, given the respective number of properties, that would be the new development road. As you can also see, you've got the start there of the 2 metre wide footway link, which would be going in where there isn't currently one at all. So it would benefit the residents of the proposed site, but also obviously existing residents of Knoll Hill. If I go on to the next slide, you will see the remainder of the works down onto Knoll Hill, down onto Woodside Avenue, and then also on the other side of, my cursor's not showing now, on this picture, the right-hand side, which is the southern side of Woodside Avenue, there's an additional length there of footway, which extends from where the footway currently ends, close to the drop curb crossing across down, carrying on west to the existing bus stop, which at the moment just has a very small, well, it doesn't have a, it's just really the pole in the grass verge. So it would give the existing footway all the way along to the verge. So there'd be an uncontrolled crossing from north to south, so you could get to both bus stops on Woodside Avenue. And that is work that is proposed as part of this application, and you will see is listed as one of the conditions, the provision of it is listed as one of the conditions. Sorry, just going back to that, you will have seen in the report, but I don't have a slide of it. They are also seeking, County Council have requested, and it's been agreed with the applicant, that they will provide funding for, full funding for a controlled crossing over Twyford Road. It was discussed quite some length at the last committee, but that is still part of the proposals. That hasn't gone away. As set out in the report, it is something that the legal agreement would seek to secure. So in summary, as we've discussed, the proposals are contrary to the current adopted plan and would have an urbanising impact on the site and physically diminish the local gap. However, the impacts are relatively localised, and the site is proposed to be allocated for residential development in the emerging plan. And as I've explained, given the plan's status and considerable progression towards adoption, it is considered that considerable weight can be attributed to it. Therefore, the proposed development, in principle, would be in accordance with that draft allocation. Now, there is a difference between the numbers in the draft allocation, which is for 45, and the application, which is for 52 units. However, the application does include an indicative layout. Now, the layout is not for members to be approving tonight. However, it is being submitted to demonstrate that, given the site constraints that we've talked about in terms of existing trees, water mains, the need to provide drainage and play area on site, they have demonstrated that 52 units could be satisfactorily accommodated on site and without impeding on the constraints, and also meeting the council's various standards to do with parking and residential amenity and things like that, so separation distances, garden sizes. So although it is higher than the draft allocation, it is considered that it has been satisfactorily demonstrated, that you could have a few more houses on this site and it would meet the standards and requirements of the council's local plan. Obviously, it brings with it other benefits such as affordable housing, as we've talked about, that's 18 units. Then there would be the provision of on-site open space and now an on-site play area, equipped play area, and also contributions to improvements to other off-site local infrastructure. So there'd be community infrastructure, open space, health facilities. So they would all be secured through the Section 106 that would be required to be completed before any permission could be issued. So the proposals have demonstrated that the site has got capacity to accommodate the level of development proposed without unacceptable harm to the character of the wider surrounding area or landscape. Apologies, I haven't quite updated this. The outstanding matter of noise has been addressed. With regard to drainage, that's still the issue as set out in the report to do with Natural England. Progress is being made. The applicant has indicated they can provide the information that Natural England are looking for. It's just we don't have that fully in place yet, and we do need it before we can issue a decision because we have to complete the associated habitat regs assessment prior to making any decision on the application. So that issue still stands, but the noise issues have now been satisfactorily resolved. And so it's the recommendation before you is that the material considerations are sufficiently in favour of the proposals and outweigh the conflict with the current adopted local plan. So there's just to put on the screen the amendment to the recommendation for environmental health from the first subject to. We've removed the need for updated parameter plans because that's been received. So then we're just looking at whether or not we need any more conditions as a result of the outstanding consultations with Hampshire Countryside Services with regards to the public right-of-way. And then there's just that bit left in there to ensure we can add in any conditions. Also, the legal agreement any legal agreement would need to be completed before permission could be granted. And that would cover all of the issues listed in the report, plus potentially anything that Hampshire Countryside Services or Natural England require to be secured. For example, with the Countryside Services, we're waiting to see if they would be looking to secure a particular financial contribution towards the improvement of the surfacing of the public right-of-way. It's something that the applicant has indicated they're content to do. It's just unfortunately, we still haven't had a response from the council as to the level of that contribution. And then just, it's quite detailed, but that's the additional condition that is required from a noise perspective to ensure that when the reserve matters was to come in, that a further noise assessment and mitigation scheme is submitted which reflects the actual layout, because obviously at the moment it's only an indicative layout, so it would need to be updated. And then it's just to make sure that internal noise standards and those noise experience within private amenity space is reached to a correct level. Although I've just noticed, apologies, that has changed slightly. I have given the applicant the correct wording. The wording before you, it deletes, it hasn't included reference to the particular guidance, British standard that needs to be referred to. So it's a slight tweak, apologies. I thought I'd updated it. It was a bit of a work in progress today. So it reads very much like that. It's just after the brackets, there's a little bit extra referencing the need for a good acoustic design-led scheme. So basically, you're looking at orientation of the buildings and boundary treatments before just assuming that you will just deal with any noise issues through glazing. Apologies for that one. I thought I'd updated it, but obviously not. And that, nothing further unless there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Liz, for your presentation. So it's always and you know, it's great that you've taken time out of your day to come and talk on these important matters. So I'd like to invite Lisa Crocher to come and speak. Hello, Lisa. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you.
And you'll get 30 seconds lights.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on it. I'll try and keep it brief. Thank you, Councillor. Do you hear me better? Oh, perfect. responsible to do so whilst we are currently above the housing target and there are brownfield options still available to be identified. Identified as a development site does not make it a good decision. We simply have to protect our green spaces. Too late. I'm very aware that the planning process favours the developer, so I ask that if the application is approved, that guarantees are made to the community. Whilst I know timetable when the service is so limited, can this money go towards the community centre fund? The Twyford Road crossing is a prevent any wiggle room on wording and risk creating another situation like the community centre access road to be learnt when precedents are set. The other point I wish to make is that the park on this site should be suitable for older children. There is a worrying lack of places for school-aged children and teenagers to play safely in the area, and we are still years away from getting the Albrook Community Centre delivered. Whilst the park at the Scout Holbrook Hill is great for preschoolers, the nearest park for older children is Lawn Road, which is quite a distance. There would be a lot of children from Boyett Wood using this park facility. It would require parking and need to suit a varied age range and be of decent size to be of true benefit. The final point I will make is that if the site is unviable by the time that suitable provisions are available, it is simply not a good site. It is not the council's job to make sites viable for developers, no matter how attractive the contributions. We benefit from council tax cuts every year, so how badly do we need this funding? There will always be a balance to be found in making sure we have the right mix of housing to meet our future needs. And in this case, lost, please.
Is going to
now.
Of Eastleigh Borough Council's stated aims. Throughout the documentation of the local plan and elsewhere, there are references to Eastleigh Borough Council believing in infrastructure first. Is this just lip service or is it a true intention? The land was allocated for housing in the local plan and the infrastructure that was to come first was clearly stated. This was the plan that was submitted to the inspector. There was a table giving the infrastructure needed for development before permission would be given. There was to be a link road from the strategic growth options to the M3. The effect of this road Hill. This was stated at, I think it's paragraph 6.4.7. It is envisaged that such an arrangement would also resolve existing traffic congestion longer planned, but it was a clear acknowledgement of the local traffic issues. Chapter 3 of the local plan lays out the in the transport network not materially exacerbate problems in existing areas. Without the infrastructure that was to precede it, this development would certainly exacerbate the problems on both the roundabout and Albrook Hill coming into and out of Eastleigh. Also in this chapter, an objective is to tackle local congestion and associated pollution by reducing car use, improving traffic the structure. The link road to allow this development before the infrastructure is in place would be to deny the vision and the objectives of congestion on the road. They should be shelved. Thank you.
Nancy. I'd like to invite David Betts.
Chair, councillors, my name's David Betts. I'm Chair of Albrook Parish Council. And this evening I'm speaking as Parish Representative in objection to this planning application. The parish previously submitted a number of objections on It's gratifying to see that the plan has been modified to address some concerns. However, the fundamentally flawed basis for development on this site remains. Highbridge Road via the Low Albrook Railway Arch and the Itchen Valley SAC, Special Area of Consultation, is prohibited. It is not a question of mitigation. No negative impact is permitted. The site comprises largely clay soil structure that makes the effective function of a sustainable urban drainage system quite impracticable, and the developer has planned a number of control runoff. Calculations have been submitted based on expected future rainfall and to of increase, and there is a substantial risk of pollution. There will be increased runoff and illegal pollution of the issue. It lies at the multi-point junction of Albrook Way, Twyford Road, Woodside Avenue and Knoll Hill. These being served by a 40-mile-an-hour roundabout, and in the case of Albrook Way, a 60-mile-an-hour link road to junction 12 of the M3. Short of installing an underpass or bridge, there is no way that pedestrian or cycle access from the new development and into Albrook Village is deemed safe, especially for young children. This is relevant as the site has been allocated Otterbourne Primary School as the A Pelican-type crossing has been proposed for the Twyford Road route. Road crossing width island on Woodside Avenue. This is a recipe for potential disaster. Appropriate for development.
One thing I did forget to mention, but it is in the report, so hopefully members have picked it up, is that facilities for the larger play areas and the teenage facilities do tend to get provided on the larger areas of open space and play facilities. So this is in accordance with the Borough Council standards. It is, I think it says in the report, it's a 400 square metre facility, so it will have a range of facilities, but it isn't aimed at the sort of it is aimed at the younger children, but that is quite standard for sites of this size. It is a relatively small development in those senses. It would be a site where anything other than this, what's described as a local equipped area of play. All the issues we've talked about that would need to be conditioned or secured through the legal agreement, that is, the legal agreement would have to be done before any planning permission could be issued. So the contributions to community infrastructure, the contributions for the crossing, the affordable housing, the community infrastructure, health facilities, they will all have to be secured through the legal agreement, and that legal agreement is signed by the applicants before any permission could be granted. So those benefits that are referred to in the report would be secured as part of any permission. It's not an after thing, it has to be sorted before any planning permission could be issued. There was reference to viability. This isn't a site where viability has been raised as an issue. It's looking to be policy compliant. There's no reduction in standards of affordable housing provision or in Section 106 financial contributions. So viability has not been raised as an issue, and it's the scheme before you is policy compliant, fully policy compliant. So I'm just looking at the notes. With regard to the link road, I note the comments it talked about, it would also have the benefit of easing existing traffic issues. However, it was put in for the benefit of the strategic growth area. That is why it was in the local plan, and that is why it's now come out, because the strategic growth area is no longer being taken forward as part of the emerging local plan. Following on from the inspector's comments, the link road was the previous link road was proposal has now been removed. There is a suggestion that land for the safeguarding of a more local link road should be the land should be reserved for that purpose, but that doesn't affect this development site. That a provision of a local link road to address existing issues and what have you could be provided without the need for any land on this site to come forward. So it doesn't affect the provision, the development of this particular site. And obviously the link road as previously proposed was linked to the strategic growth area. There are, the consultation response from the County Council is that they've raised no objection and they are content with the nature of the proposed off-site highway improvements, being the additional footway links. Woodside Avenue you can cross in 2 stages because you've got the central island, and then Twyford Road you have got the proposal for a pelican crossing or similar, so it would be a controlled crossing. So you could get across to the eastern side and Albrook Hill and Otterbourne Hill, and the route to the primary school and the other parish facilities, you could be done through the improved facilities. It is recognised that at the moment those facilities aren't there, but this development would have to provide them. The 2 footway links on Woodside Avenue and Knoll Hill, they are conditioned, and then the contribution to fully fund the crossing would be secured through the 106. So those, in consideration of those, the County Council as the local highway, safe access and safe pedestrian and cycle provision would be provided as part of this, and that although it would increase traffic levels, they are, when considered as part of the levels in the area, they are a negligible increase, and it wouldn't be adverse. And sorry, then with regard to the impact on the river, satisfactorily resolved before permission could be granted. So our ecologists are from a water quality perspective, the lead local flood authority system that it can satisfactorily drain the site. But Natural England, given the particular circumstances of the River Itchen and the ground conditions of this site, they are concerned about sediment increase in sediment loading and what impact that will have on the salmonoid species in the River Itchen. If there is a solution and a way forward, it's just involved collecting and data now so that measures can be, mitigation can be properly designed. So that is something that would have to be resolved. The recommendation before you today that would have to be satisfactorily resolved before permission could be granted. It wouldn't be something that would come about afterwards. That's everything, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I invite Jim Tarzi to vote to speak in favour of the application.
Thank you, Chair, members. My name's Jim. I'm consultant from this group to the applicants, who are the landowners of this site, and the landowners, just for your information, are the Cranberry Estate. Since the application was heard in March, a number of issues have been followed up in response to matters raised by members and also subsequently by some statutory consultees. As has been explained to you by the planning officer, the reason for deferral related to the lack of an on-site equipped play area, given the site's relative remoteness from the nearest play area on Old Brook Hill. This has now been rectified, and the scheme layout has been adjusted to include a play area that has a minimum size, 400 square metres, and can be as part of Eastleigh. It's shown on the illustrative site layout that you've seen and that we prepared, and as you can see, it's close to the Knoll Hill frontage, and has had regard to the existing on-site drainage attenuation, the proximity to the closest dwellings, both those proposed and existing, and the nearby protected trees and their root protection areas. The effect of providing a play area has, as explained, has reduced the number of dwellings from 53 to 52, but maintained affordable housing provision at 35%. Area on site, the scheme has maintained the provision of what was raised at committee last time, which was improved and safe linkages for pedestrians locally, and as Mrs. Howson has explained, the new footpath alongside Knoll Hill and linking with the closest bus stop on Woodside Avenue, the provision of the new pedestrian crossing on Twyford Road, which is the walking route to the closest school. Not that I'm suggesting the closest school is that close, it's in Otterbourne. And a new surface to the existing footpath alongside the site's western boundary, and which connects the site with Boyett Lane to the north. Just finally, further discussions have also taken place since March, which have been touched on tonight, and there's a commitment to agree to 3 other matters, which in summary include agreement with Hampshire County Council Countryside Services to align the footpath as it meets Knoll Hill to its original alignment as per the statutory footpath plan. Secondly, agreement with National England to undertake sampling of water within the River Itchen. That will take place pending tonight's decision to assess the sediment runoff from the site, and that can be appropriately mitigated on site through appropriate drainage and landscaping measures. And as has been explained, that is to protect Atlantic salmon using the river. And thirdly, it's a detailed reserve matters stage. The layout is accompanied by a noise survey. Those plots. These are all important but detailed matters to be dealt with in the event of the principle of development at this outline.
Public that have come to speak today.
I could almost. Do we have a number of trees removed versus the number of trees that be planted at site? Will the roads within the estate be adopted by Hampshire County Council? Who will pay for the maintenance of any suds and the ongoing maintenance of any sud systems that obviously will also deal with the sediment? And for how long? Was a safety audit undertaken on the roundabout by Hampshire County Council? Who's actually going to deliver the play area? EBC or the developers? Or will that come under? And
moved. I will just check, but I believe it's 4. And I don't have the exact number of trees. This is an outline, and landscaping is a reserved matter. However, you can see from the indicative layout that there is a significant increase in the matters layout would come forward would have to be generally in accordance with that indicative layout. So we would be looking for those green links through and the street trees and the additional planting that's shown there. So significantly more than 4. Standards, so that there is room for refuse vehicles, for example, in terms of width, and so that we're content with the construction of the actual construction of the roads, so that they stand up. But we can't insist, and neither can the county council. We can't insist that the roads are adopted. So, if this layout was to come forward, and obviously this layout isn't being approved at present, some of those roads wouldn't naturally be adopted by the county council. I'm thinking of the ones as you go in and round to come back towards Westfield House, where you've got sort of a private drive type appearance with by a few houses, short end of a cul-de-sac. Those types of things often aren't adopted by the county council these days, but it might be that the road running along the east and possibly as it heads in to the site, that might be adopted. But it's not something we consider now because it's an outline application and we don't have a detailed layout for us. Obviously, when we get to the detailed layout stage, but even then, it is still something that is up for discussion and not something. In terms of maintenance of the site, obviously with seeing the comments from Natural England, in any event we look to secure management and maintenance details for landscaping open space. Quite frequently done by a maintenance company, management company. Southern Water in some instances are now starting to adopt SUDs, but I don't know at this stage whether this is what they would be willing to. Obviously if they did, then it becomes their ongoing responsibility. Natural England are very keen to know the detail because of the potential impacts on definitely be secured and set out at this stage that the management details would need to be agreed, and potentially we might go further done at whatever intervals or particular measures that needed to be in place to secure the appropriate mitigation. Safety audit of the roundabout by county council, I'm afraid I don't know. I wasn't actually the case officer for this application, so I haven't been involved full time, but I do know, and I have read the county council's responses, in that they have raised no objection. They are content with the proposals before you in terms of traffic impacts on the surrounding network, and also the nature of the improvements to the highways infrastructure. What works they did, the application was supported from that regard. The site to be shown on the plan, but then a financial contribution to be consultation with residents to ensure that we get something that is of interest to the residents. So the legal agreement would set that out, but yes, the funded by the developer, but we, as the Borough Council, would look to provide the play equipment using their financial contribution. I think those were all your questions.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Bicknell.
Come back on a couple of bits. With reference to the SUDs, obviously Liz has covered the actual sort of the maintenance and what have you, but the bit for me, and that's the bit that comes back with the adoption of the roads, because quite often what I'm not keen on is potentially an estate where the residents end up having to pay extortionate maintenance fees for the maintenance of roads and the maintenance of sites. Because with the sediment, that might not be the easiest thing to maintain over a period of time, for because we haven't actually dealt with much to do with sediment. Actually deal with that now, or would can we put in a condition where a safety audit is done on the roundabout, because it is a fast roundabout, and with the way slow coming off or onto Knoll Hill, lines on the roundabout to actually make it safer, because they are responsible for highway safety as well as the highway network.
Councillor Bicknell, can we take those forward?
So with regard to the maintenance for the roads, yes, if the county council don't adopt them, then generally it's done by a management company, and these days the developers maintenance fee that's passed on to the householders. Similar to if you're in a flat and you're the leaseholder, you have to pay maintenance for the ground. So it's that sort of approach, but on a wider scale these days. So yes, that is obviously a concern, and we do push for things to be adopted where but at the moment we're not in a position to in terms of the SUDs, now the Borough Council does adopt open space, and depending on how the SUDs are designed, the direct services are content to take on the management of SUD facilities. Now, this is obviously potentially a particular issue for this one in terms of the sediment issues that Natural England have raised. With SUDs features, the general aim is to make is actually more akin to the management of open space. So it's mowing, it's trimming, it's cutting, it's looking after planting, it's weeding, that sort of thing. So if in order to answer Natural England's comments, the SUDs can still be designed from that perspective, then it may be that the Borough Council would be willing to take it on as part of the open space adoption. But at this moment in time, because we don't know the final impact will have on the SUD scheme, then I can't say, and direct services wouldn't be able to say at this stage whether it's something they would take on. Now, the 106 could be worded to ask for the Borough Council, the land to be transferred to the Borough Council, for the Borough Council to maintain and manage the open space going forward. Generally, that involves a commuted sum which the developer pays, which covers a certain number of years, and then after that, it's we are starting to take them on board, and direct services are quite happy to do that generally, but I don't know at this stage whether there would be anything more complex that would mean expertise which we don't currently have in-house. Come out when we've bottomed out the issue with Natural England. I'm afraid.
Thank you, Liz.
And on the safety audit, the County Council, in replying as Local Highway Authority, so if they are safety, traffic impact on queuing, safety of the needed for pedestrians and cyclists. So they will have had to consider the whole package. They have confirmed to us they have no objection. So it wouldn't be reasonable for us to then add on a condition requiring do more work. But the County Council, in their remit as local highway authority, have said they've got no objection. So their comments would ordinarily include sort of traffic implications and highway safety. If they thought changes were needed, then that would have formed part of the discussion. But the discussion has been about pedestrian footways.
Thank you. Any further questions from councillors? Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick query about the attenuation ponds. I noted in one of the reports, it sort of was saying that the need for them to be as natural as possible and not to be fenced or anything like that. And I was just thinking, does that create a problem in the fact that we are putting the play area in that same sort of area? And the reason that we were talking about, you know, it would enable to another site. So I just wondered if that was problematic. Several of the speakers today have talked about the bus service and how bad it is. I did try and very quickly do some Googling to find out how bad it was. And it seemed, from what I could quickly find, was that service stops very early evening, Monday to Friday. And I don't know what the situation is at the weekend, so I just wondered, can we just around, you know, the bus service? And also, in a similar vein, cycle routes. And I was reading the traffic management about the cycle route there were, how well it was. I'm a council, not the north, so I'm not overly familiar with it. But when I most of the routes seem to me to be quite major routes, and so I was thinking, well, when you say it's quite well connected, who are you thinking of as the cyclist? Because would a mum, for example, be, well, if I think of myself, I wouldn't be comfortable to get on a bike and cycle down from there and go down, I wouldn't want to go down Twyford Road with the big lorries, or I wouldn't want to go along Woodside Avenue or something. So are there sort of safe cycle routes that would be safe for children to use? What we want is for people to be switching away from cars and going. If it's target to achieve carbon neutrality in the borough by 2030.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Liz?
Thank you. With regard to the to get them designed as natural as possible. Generally, they aren't designed as ponds that hold water permanently. It's rainfall events and control the runoff so runoff rate so that it can be controlled. We do that by generally looking at the profile of the basins. So we would look for the sides to be gradient of 1 in 4 wherever possible, or one area, so that's a gradient that's considered people could easily, if kids or anyone went in, they could, or dogs, they could easily get out again. If you end up with a very sort of big crater, more problems, because actually if someone is in and needing help, it's harder to get to if it's fenced. So I think historically there was more reliance, as our knowledge of sustainable drainage has advanced, as it's become more important with developments going forward. It's recognised now that if you actually design them with naturalised features with those, at least one segment of, ideally everywhere running forward, doesn't always happen, but if there's a decent area where still say that that was safe, and direct services are content that they look at that as part of the local sustainable drainage was fine. Going forward on new development, drainage is nearly always somewhere on the site next to the open space, just because by is and how it works. That is a safe relationship if the basins are designed properly. In terms of the bus service and cycle route, I do have the transport assessment on my laptop, so I can open it up and have a look. I don't have the details in my head of the bus if it's a development of, you know, hundreds of houses, then yes, we might look at setting up a new bus route or taking money towards it. But generally, if sites length of time, but actually it needs to come from more discussions with us and, you know, increased use of it by residents, so it's encouraging and advertising and that side of things. So where the county council look to take the money is to improve the facilities, which will hopefully encourage people. So if people have got better facilities at the bus, you know, I don't have up-to-date, as of today, information before me, but if you want to open up the transport assessment, I can have a look what it says, but from knowledge of the area, I don't think there are segregated cycleways. So the new provision that the county council has looked for are 2-metre footways. They're not looking to create segregated footpaths, cycleways, where you would normally look for a 3-metre width to allow for that shared use. So it is connected in that they are roads that you can cycle on. But yes, some people, as with any road, some people will be more inclined to cycle on it than others. Unfortunately, there are limited places where you've got complete direct routes between anywhere that is fully segregated. There will be instances where you do have a shared footpath, cycleway around Eastleigh, and there are areas where you don't, and obviously that's the current circumstances for a lot of the residents. Do you want me to try and open up the transport assessment, or? Okay. I'll just take this off and then disconnect, otherwise you'll just see me through screens.
Whilst Liz is looking for that, would anyone else like to ask any questions? Councillor Clark.
Designated as the school, primary school. Are there any schemes that the school has in place for safe transport to school. Because if we take, for example, that there are 18 affordable units for housing here, some of those units might have primary school aged children, and it suddenly becomes a more expensive place to live if it's not safe for those children to walk to school. And it might be much more difficult for those parents to access the designated school if it's not safe to walk. So are we aware of any schemes that the County Council or Otterbourne Primary School have got in place for children?
Today, the County Council do have a school, if that's the correct title, who work with all schools to look at school travel plans and safe routes to use sustainable modes of transport, measures in place where they can, but who deal with that measures and seek to identify measures that are required to make improvements and bring them forward where they can. There will be a sort of a school travel plan, effectively. Specific measures, and obviously it wouldn't have been designed with this site in mind, but it will be designed with getting people to be able to walk to the school and the provision. And looking at the ability for people to.
Councillor Doogie.
Thank you, Chair. Can you clarify on the parking? I know people mentioned it quite a lot, but I don't think I've heard from you what the provision will be like on site. So can you quickly just clarify what the parking provision will be on site, please?
Yes, certainly. So it's the indicative layout. Obviously, it is only an indicative layout. I think it has allocated parking for all units because they're all houses. So that's either drives or parking spaces at the front of the properties. 2 parking spaces or 3 if it's a 4-bed or greater. Excuse me, sufficient space for visitor parking to the council standards as well. So it's fully compliant from that point of view, the indicative layout.
Any further questions from any other councillor?
I'm just trying to find the bus timetables. Oh, thank you.
So this is the cycle network in the area. So the site is here. Yep. And there's an off-road provision along with the school and the college available off-road.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, thank you. Can I just provide the cycle route? So there is an off-road cycle route that heads along with to cycle that route. So that goes down Woodside Avenue and then in, and there's also an off-road, as in not even alongside road, sort of through the residential area of Boyett Wood down to Crestwood Community College, and then obviously the shops down on Shakespeare Road as well. So yes, there are, not down to Twyford Road. I don't know, sorry. Sorry. I've got some technology, but not everything. A little while to warm up last time when there we go. So the blue line, as you can see on the key, is the offside. All the way down here, down to Woodside Avenue, down to the college, and then further on into Eastleigh, and then also this one here, down within the residential area, completely off-road, down through to the college and the parade of shops and the doctor. I think there's doctors there as well, isn't there? And then further on in. Sorry, thank you.
Eastleigh town centre on that route. You have to go on a road.
So it's an off-road provision until you get
get to Eastleigh.
not the full Eastleigh town centre, but down to the college and to the infant school, you can get that off-road.
Absolutely, but you can't get into Eastleigh town centre without going on a road. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Sorry, Nancy about the bus service, just to perhaps save some
Yep, that's
time.
fine.
She said it's 2 hourly, none on Sundays, and but you didn't answer my other
With regards to carbon neutrality, obviously we have an obligation to provide housing over future years, and we go towards that. That's why it's a draft allocation, because we have to identify certain sites. So we currently have what our obligations are from that point of view. So we can't not allow housing development because we're looking for to be carbon neutral. We can't stop need in the area. But what we do on an individual basis would be that we would look for, and I think it is, yeah, it's condition requirements that we list in the condition. So we limit the water consumption, but also seek a reduction in carbon emissions below, so it's lower than the recognised standard. We seek improvements on all new houses going forward. So it's a 19% reduction in carbon emissions, so from an energy efficiency. So some of that could be through the built fabric of the unit. That there are different technologies coming forward which obviously provide better insulation, so you need less heating, etc. Or it can technology, but those are generally the main two that people are coming forward with. And for since I've worked at the council, we have always been doing that. So yes, every new we are.
Councillor Campbell.
This target of the borough, not the council, but the borough being carbon neutral by 2030, and obviously at the time this development wasn't part of that, but obviously it falls within the borough. So in doing this development, it will obviously create a certain amount of carbon. So I'm trying to understand what that is, and therefore how that will impact on that target. Is it taken into account? How is it accounted for, I guess I'm asking?
I must admit, I don't know the details of the calculations that came before that. It's been in the emerging local plan for a number of years. Definitely, it would have been in the emerging local plan. The current one that's before for development on this site. So how they, I must admit, I don't know how they included the calculations for the housing development and other development going forward, but it would have been known about by the council. This isn't an unknown site. It's not a site that we're actually suggesting it come forward. So as a result, I would have anticipated that if so however they treated the known housing delivery we needed to achieve, this site is not. I don't know, I can't provide you with a complete answer, but my understanding would be that we must have taken into account new growth, because we clearly can't stop, and therefore, and this was an identified going forward. So however it was included in those calculations, this wouldn't have been outside of that. It would have been part of the anticipated growth for the area.
For answering the questions. So do I have a proposer for the motion? Councillor Bicknell.
Yes, Chair, happy to propose the motion as written with the amendments and an addition of the conditions that Liz has set out.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Park, thank you. So we now move on to debate. Councillor Tyson-Payne.
I'm happy to. I have real problems with this site. I feel the infrastructure is missing. I feel that there are more houses than we need. Throughout lockdown, particularly the first lockdown, I walked every day, it seemed, and I used that footpath that was on the site, and it's a real loss from the local area than I've ever done before. It was much used, much loved, and it's really lovely because it's naturally lovely. It's not being developed. Loss to local residents who I know. Do you know, they used it so much that the dog waste bins couldn't cope. It was staggering. There isn't a dog waste bin on that particular part, but towards it there is. So I think it's and on a couple of occasions I've had a couple of near misses, and I didn't have any children with me, and I'm a relatively sensible person when crossing the road, and I am not inclined to support this. I've not heard that. I've just heard more of. I'm not comfortable with that. So I will really struggle to do anything than reject this application. Thank you, Chair.
Any more debate?
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Planning is always local people involved in the process, but planning based around the National Planning Policy Framework, which is based on evidence and facts and emits emotion. and when you look at this particular site, the emerging local plan, and as AL2, it is a material and a significant part of the decision-making process. It carries significant. What many number of councillors, with the exception perhaps of, well, definitely with the exception of Councillor Mann and Councillor Irish, may not know, is that AL2 has been in the local plan process since we actually the actual plan that's in place at the moment that expired in 2011. So AL2 has been talked about for nigh on 10 years. That we've actually had the detail. And obviously it's the urban edge is being redrawn as part of the plan process. It sits within the planning process of countryside. It sits within the urban edge. And we all know what's happened with reference to the gaps and the planning inspector. We had countryside gaps. Planning inspector didn't like that and wanted us to have settlement gaps, because within our gaps we had a lot of woodland, sinks, sacks, and all the other areas that have natural protection within the gaps, and the planning inspector didn't like that. So it doesn't actually sit in a gap. And when you're thinking about planning and the evidence in front, I actually see no evidence on planning policy why this can actually be. We haven't got all the detail at the moment because this is an outline application, so it's the principle of development. It's showing 52 houses, which clearly the site can actually take. It may be less, who knows? What Natural England come back with their condition on the sediment. They might need larger actuation ponds and suds, so there might be another house that goes. So again, looking at evidence and taking into account the National Planning Policy Framework, which does have a presumption in favour of development, and it's clear there is absolutely no on-site play in that area of Eastleigh North at all at the moment. Is the Scout Hut, which obviously is not very well accessed at the moment because of crossing the roads. So actually the social benefits on the site will also benefit Albrook Knoll, Broomhill Way and other surrounding roads, because it's the only play area. Because as has already been stated, the next closest one is Lawn Road. The financial contributions meet the National Planning Policy Framework with reference to the economy via the S106, and with reference to public transport, our own policy, where I've written it down from the report, Safe Policy 100T of the could be well cycling and walking. There are some bus stops to this development, so it could be served, so it meets the policy. There is a cycle route that gets you all the way down, as we've just seen, off-road into the sort of Kipling area, and then of course you can link onto the cycleway that's actually on Lee Road and get to here. So it meets. The actual report states that the maximum increase in traffic on Albrook Way is 0.85%. Woodside Twyford Road 0.7%, and Albrook Hill 0.56%. And the Highways Agency, Highway Authority, Hampshire County Council, have clearly said issues with traffic management of the site. So from a planning point of view, principle of outline development and the detailed on the access to be declined. I do have emails from residents and the views are nice, very nice over to the south down. The development is going to be structured in such a way that there are still some views, something the developer doesn't actually do, and it would be something we would struggle to force them to do, because as said, you're not entitled, you know, in effect on planning, views don't carry much planning weight. And I think the developer has done as good a job as they can to provide a site that meets all, you know, the National Planning Policy Framework. Whilst giving social benefits, economic benefits, and obviously there is management for habitat management. There's some areas being put back to native grassland. You've obviously got which will increase wildlife. So actually there is a is throw it out, because personally I can see no planning reason for throwing it out. To do so, in view, the developer would go to appeal, and based on planning evidence and our policies and the fact that the emerging local plan actually trumps and that, then actually the developer would go to appeal and the planning inspector would just overturn it and grant it. And what actually happen is residents' expectations would be raised and then downturned, and potentially would have costs that in effect the taxpayer is paying. And that is purely on the factual and the National Planning Policy Framework. So thank you. So I will be supporting this application, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Bicknell, Councillor Irish.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we discussed this in great depth, I remember, on the 22nd of March, and I think the majority of members were quite happy with the scheme. It's not an ideal scheme. It's not fantastic. It's not in a particularly good. It's in a very nice area. Some block at the time was the play area. No, we seem to have resolved the play area. We've now got a play area, so that's good. Very busy road to go up to Albrook Hill to get to the play area that's up there. So I'm that problem, but I do agree with Councillor Bicknell that, you know, about it. You've got to have planning grounds. If we turned it down, the planning inspector would grant it, and then we would have the costs. So, we've done a good job. We've amended it to what we want it to be. It's the support it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Irish.
and I especially came down to the bus station to have a look. The bus came from Boyd Wood. Chandlersford, same bus. So seen it. I've just come back from Boyd Wood and there's no passengers on it. So you come with me and have a look. From the bus station, there was one passenger that came out of the Railway Institute who lives in Wellmore. He got on there. He took me all the way around. I spent loads of time all the way up and back. We didn't get one passenger. So what can the buses do? They just can't keep running empty, can they? If people are not using them, they're going to be withdrawn. It's easier to say every morning about so you can't blame the bus companies for reducing the bus service unless we put up our rates and keep paying them for running empty buses. That's all.
Any further debate, councillors? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I've got all sorts of points sort of written down here because I can see I suppose living there. I think it's good that, you know, get a provision of a play on site. That is a positive. I think the around the improvements to the bus stop and what have you is good. The extension of the pavement, you know, that's really positive. Was jobs, you know, created in the that would be the same wherever the site was. But then on the other side, I is the value of green space itself to like well-being. Actually, that site as I did on Sunday, and as Councillor Tyson-Payne was saying, she did a lot during the lockdown. It is absolutely beautiful. It makes you feel really, really positive, and there is a real value to that. The report talked about the economic arguments and saying, but yes, but there's nothing to say there wouldn't be people possibly living in the town already who are just moving from one part to another. So I don't think that was a particularly strong argument. I am concerned about the sustainability of the site. I think the reality is that you have to have a car if you're going to live there, and if you don't have a car, and I think there are a huge number of community facilities in that area. So more people in that area and sort of isolating them, I don't think is a particularly really concerned about the impacts on climate change, and I think we should have a very clear idea about the carbon that will be a new development. So in terms of both the construction of it and also people living there, that's something that really concerns me, but obviously I fully appreciate that that's something that will be picked up and hasn't been left, but we just don't have the following information at this sort of stage. Noise, I think even on a Sunday when I walked the site, it was that was shown. I was actually quite concerned that in the indicative plan, the affordable housing sort of providing the buffer for the other housing sort of, you know, in the site. So I wasn't particularly keen on that, but I accept that that's only indicative. It most definitely would change the character of the place. What Councillor Mann said about his able to use and the reality is if they're dependent on public transport. So I think that creates an inequality issue. Are actually, you know, maybe able and fit enough to be able to cycle or walk, but walking into town, you know, I just had a quick look to get to Fleming Park, 33 minutes, to get to Boywood Surgery, 20 minutes, to get to the council, 30 minutes to Otterbourne School, 15 to 17 minutes, this is all Google walk times, to Shakespeare. So I don't know, I take on board the points that Councillor made. I think those were some really good points, but I have to say at this moment in time I am undecided. I think there are lots of problems with this development.
Any further debate from councillors? Good points have been made for and against and as comments. As far as I'm aware, people have talked a lot about the footpath, but the footpath's not going anywhere, so people can still use that footpath and can access the forest sites and the is it built on a paddock where the horses graze, which isn't public land anyway. The issue of traffic and noise, the relevant authorities have said that is okay. Last time this came to committee, we were concerned and that Twyford Road, I still have concerns about Woodside Avenue. And you know, hopefully, we may look at maybe adjusting speed limits there, especially. Sorry, Councillor Clark, did you want to come in? Just give take on what's been said. So, you've got 1,800 people. So, where we can get affordable housing, it's crucial for. It's going to be. We can have footpaths built as well. So, you know, the house, if they think it's too far, then they don't need to buy that house or choose that house. It is in an area that the local plan has allocated for houses, and I think, you know, and this is a site that is earmarked for it. Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Alex. I do want to speak because I do care very much about the need for housing, and it's very rare actually in the 11 years I've been on here, on the council generally, not ELAC, for me. But it needs to be done. I'm not saying that as someone who finds any excuse to oppose housing sites. And the NPPF contains a presumption in favour of sustainable development, but this is not supporting sustainable communities which provide for the needs of present and future residents, as we're advised to. But development here with the infrastructure promised is not sustainably providing for the needs of future residents of this site, and it's exacerbating the problems of existing residents that are marginal. It's a fact, and I've been appalled as the councillor. It's really sad that councillors are. A shop, a pub, a post office have all disappeared over the last quarter of a century, and the scheme, in my view, exacerbates the decline because it's a car-dependent scheme, and not only does it will encourage people to use the car to carry out any activity. There's no bus service that could be relied upon for any activity at all. We can argue about the rights and wrongs for that. I'd like to see across the borough, but the fact is that anyone who's moving to this site will not be able to use the bus for anything other than a visit to Winchester, for example. The bus shelter and information are of minimal value. The car-dependent nature of the scheme, combined with the increased number of housing, where the rationale for that increased number of housing is only simply that you can fit a few more sites physically on the site, gives this the feel of urban sprawl, where you go to shops and you have to travel some distance before you come to any other amenities. It feels like but most sites of this size would be in an area where older children could safely walk to a play area that already exists. So it was said that Lawn Road has a play area that older children might like to use, but it's not on a safe walking route for older teen years. So affordable housing is always very welcome. I use the word absolutely. Yeah, I completely support the need for affordable housing. You know, we can't understate. You know, we can't do enough to help those people who are on the housing list. But it needs to be in the right. Living on this site would not be particularly affordable. People who move there would need to have a car. We want to make sure that any residents are going to enjoy the experience of living there. I gave an example of Osborne Primary School. Families of any children who live on this site, their children to swim. Mentioned, and the local plan that was submitted to the inspector, which included the SGO, has been referred plan. It was predicated on the fact that the link road would exist, and I know Liz Harrison's said that the link road was purely to serve the SGO, but part of the reasoning for this site was that any impact on Albrook Hill, which is already absolutely unacceptable, would be alleviated by that link road. And that link road is now not happening. So I think that that is particularly unfair on the local residents, because they were told this forward with infrastructure that would exist, and that infrastructure is not now going to happen. Now also, it's something that I don't think is processes, is that when there was a consultation over the local plan that was submitted to the planning inspector, before it was submitted, there was a consultation and various options were considered. Options B and C. But many residents in Eastleigh North expressed a preference for option A, and they were told by leading members of the council, lots of councillors, they were told by officers that they wouldn't want option A because it would lead to small sites coming forward like this with infrastructure that would be unsustainable. So they were told not to go for option A, and I think it is bad for public confidence that actually what is now happening is that a small site like this is coming forward with minimal infrastructure and is giving those people exactly what they were told they wouldn't want. So I do think that, you know, we should completely make our decisions according to planning rules, but this is not sustainable development in my opinion, and I think that we should be willing to speak to the community and fight up. You know, we often get told the planning inspector is going to do this or do that, but the last couple of years have told us that sometimes when we're told that the planning inspector will go one way, so I'll be voting against this, and you know, it looks like it's, well, I can see where it will go because of the number of people who have spoken in favour, but I hope that some people between now and the vote will change their minds.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We'll now move to the vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Is carried. Thank you, councillors. Before we move on to the next item, would anyone like a 5-minute comfort break? That would be great. Thank you. Eastleigh, and I'd like to ask Barbara Thomas to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This presentation is to explain the traffic regulation proposals for Eastleigh, to run through the representations received in response to the consultation, and to summarise the recommendations to the committee. Proposals to introduce waiting and parking restrictions on various roads in Eastleigh were advertised on the 29th of January, with a 3-week consultation period. 44 representations were received, 26 in relation to 5 sites and 18 in relation to disabled persons parking bays. The first site is Albrook Hill, on the eastbound approach to a give way instruction in advance of a traffic calming island. The proposal is to introduce 30 metres of no waiting at any time restriction on the north side of the road in advance of numbers 31 to 37 clear. There was one objection from a resident who was concerned that the proposal would prevent her and her elderly neighbours from unloading their shopping. The no waiting at any time restriction permits vehicles to wait in order to load or unload goods or passengers. It's also noted that numbers 29 to 41 on the north side of the road have vehicular access to the rear of their properties. The recommendation, therefore, is to introduce this restriction as advertised. The next site is Crestwood View. This is a cul-de-sac estate of 80 dwellings built approximately 12 to 15 years ago. The level of off-street parking provided with the properties is 1 space per property or 2 spaces for the larger properties, and residents are in the habit of parking their additional vehicles on the footway and carriageway to the extent dust carts are frequently obstructed from accessing or being able to turn around. The proposed objected to the restrictions, whilst one was in favour. The objections are on the basis that the residents need development was built. A maximum number of parking places was permitted in order to encourage residents to own fewer cars and to travel by more car. Given the level of objections, it is recommended that further engagement with residents takes place to ascertain if more acceptable measures to address this issue can be identified. I will treat Chestnut Close and Nursery Gardens as a single site for the purposes of this presentation. Properties were often unable to park nearby, owing to much of the curbside parking being taken up by commuters. Engineers proposed the introduction of time-limited parking bays during the working day for approximately 4 vehicles in Chestnut Close and Nursery Gardens. By. The presence of the parking bay would contradict the prohibition of driving restrictions of these roads, and hence it was necessary to propose the revocation of the prohibition of driving restriction. Furthermore, prohibition of driving is not an appropriate restriction to deal with parking issues. Rather, it should be used to deal with unwanted moving traffic in a road. The proposal attracted 9 objections from Chestnut Close, along with a petition signed by 45 residents of the neighbouring estate, Nursery Gardens, the Croft and the Oaklands. The objections indicate that whilst residents are unhappy about non-residents parking, the level of non-resident parking is not so great that they or their visitors are unable to find curbside parking space during the working day, and they object to the introduction of a parking bay. They do not wish to lose the current prohibition of motor vehicles except for access restriction, because they feel that it is in place to protect the on-street parking space for residents and their visitors, and they would prefer to see this enforced. Given the level of objection from the residents, it is recommended that the proposed time-limited parking bays are withdrawn and further investigations take place to ascertain the best way forward. It is further recommended that the prohibition of driving restriction is not revoked at this time. The next site is Stoneham Lane, where we're proposing a no waiting at any time restriction on both sides of the road from the existing restrictions just north of St Nicholas Church, southwards to the boundary with Southampton. This to address the problems with cars parking on the new shared cycleway and footway near the sports grounds. The character of Stoneham Lane makes it unsuitable for parking to take place anywhere along its length. We received one objection from the rector of St Nicholas Church, who would wish to retain the ability for weddings and funerals to be able to use the Lichgate access from Stoneham Lane as is traditional. I've advised the rector that there is an exemption to waiting restrictions for loading and unloading, and we will be adding an exemption to the order to exempt wedding and funeral cars from no waiting any time restrictions, as is standard practice nationally. Accordingly, the rector has withdrawn her objection, and therefore we recommend that this restriction is introduced as advertised. 19 comments were received objecting to the imposition of up to 6 disabled bays on their road and up to 12 bays in Cornwall Road and Belmont Road. The proposal in question is to amend the existing traffic regulation order in such a way so as to enable the council to install up to 6 disabled bays in a road or up to 12 on Cornwall and Belmont roads as required for disabled residents without having to go through a separate traffic regulation order process each time. This would make the process of installing and removing disabled bays much quicker and more flexible than present. The proposal does not include the installation of any new disabled persons parking bays in those roads, and residents directly affected by prospective disabled bays would still be consulted as they are at present. Please note that this particular proposal relates only to disabled bays outside existing permit parking zones, and we'll be seeking to progress a similar arrangement for permit parking zones in due course. It's recommended that the committee approves this proposal as advertised. No representations have been received in relation to either proposed waiting restrictions on Grantham Road at the accessway serving the rear of High Street and Market Street, or to the proposed relocation of a permit parking bay from Arnold Road to Mansbridge Road, and it is proposed that these restrictions are implemented as advertised. In summary, the representations have been considered, and it's recommended that the proposed restrictions be implemented with the exception of Crestwood View, Chestnut Close, Nursery Gardens, the Croft and the Oaklands, as detailed earlier. That concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I'd now like to ask Tom Calverley to come forward and speak. Apologies that you've had to wait so long, Mr. Calverley, but welcome to the committee.
Thank you for this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I am Tom Calverley. My wife and I have lived in Chestnut Close since 2003. And I'm speaking about Chestnut Close, but much of what I have to say would be relevant to Nursery Gardens as well. And can I please first of all ask members to look at recommendation 2 on page 67, which relates to Crestwood View. And that, as Ms Thomas has referred to, proposes further engagement with residents. But recommendation 7, related to Chestnut Close, over the page, does not mention further engagement with residents. And I would submit to you that if it's good enough for Crestwood View, it's good enough for Chestnut Close. I have been trying to engage the engineers in dialogue for 4 months now, to very little avail. One conversation with Ms Thomas. And I think it really is time we got to sit down together and work something out, which I'm sure we can do. Could I just ask you to move on to page 70 of the report? The right-hand column there, halfway down, the comment about Crestwood View, about residents should consider the parking situation before they buy the property. And I would say that in respect of Chestnut Close, 18 years ago, we did exactly that. We had the protection of a prohibition of driving order. And had we not had that, we would not have bought the house. In fact, we probably could not have got near the house for office workers and garage workers parking. They are parking there today, 5 in there today, in contravention of the order. I do understand the difficulty that the police have, and I'm not proposing the permanent solution. I just comment as well, on, as a side comment really, on page 71, halfway down there, that measures to reduce, I would say prevent, commuter parking in residential areas could be considered as part of a comprehensive review of travel in the Eastleigh area. And I would comment that perhaps this should have been done before all the planning permissions for all the developments which now surround us, which are on the map, which I did circulate by email to members yesterday. We have been completely surrounded by development, and planning policies aimed at getting people on their bike and car share and all the rest of it have very little impact, sadly. Perhaps there's more scope yet. Can you kindly now just move on to page 87, which is my words. To page 88, I comment on the future under paragraph 4. No one we thought was coming to committee in March. It was deferred. I offered at that time to solution before this meeting in June, but I was dismayed by
that, but I think you've got your point across very well. To this to ensure that further engagement with residents included in the recommendation, because
might I just add in part
we now have a written statement from Nicolette Locke of Nursery Gardens.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, this is a statement from Nicolette Locke on behalf of all the residents of Nursery Gardens and the Oaklands who signed the letter of objection to Nursery Gardens plan in the proposed traffic regulation order. The Borough of Eastleigh. In our letter of objection to the plan, we explained why the proposed does not in any way safeguard the residents of Nursery Gardens and the Oaklands, and we ask that Eastleigh Borough Council do not proceed with restrictions on the Croft, the Oaklands, pending further monitoring of the traffic and engineering team. We would like to confirm that we support both recommendations.
Thank you. Do any councillors have any questions? So, I'd like to propose an amendment to the original to ensure further engagement with residents of Red Lodge, the Croft and Oakland, and I believe Councillor Irish is seconded in that. Can we vote to that, please? All those in favour? Thank you. So that's unanimous. So now, can we have a proposal? Councillor Irish, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Tyson-Payne. Thank you. So is there any debate? Councillor Irish.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see Tom Calverley here tonight. He'll I'm and I committee, and I remember going to about a couple of years ago before COVID, going to a meeting in Romsey with Tess Valley, talking about the problems all around that, and the roads that I represent in Valley Park have now got parking restrictions, and a lot of Tess Valley ones have now got parking restrictions all along Bournemouth Road, in Valmore Road, and Castle Lane and Thamesmead, and all those roads have got parking restrictions. So it does seem right that we do protect people in Chestnut Close, because there is a problem with commuter parking. Tess Valley recognised that. There was a very good officer at Tess Valley who was doing an awful lot of work on that, but unfortunately he retired, and since he retired, tried at Hampshire Corporate Park to give them more parking spaces, but that's not working, so we can't have them parking in those residential roads. So I fully support anything we can do to protect the residents in those roads from all this parking we don't really deserve to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Irish. Any further debate? Councillor Bicknell.
Thank you, Chair. Just very, very briefly. Thank you. You might not have got through all of it, but you're 3 ward councillors. I think I welcome the public engagement with the nursery gardens at Croft and Chestnut Close, but also we have to be realistic, because as there are limited things that actually can be done. However, with engaging with the residents, then that is the way to actually and the limits at her disposal. But I think with good engagement from the transport and residents in those areas, then at least whatever is agreed, then you have residents buy in, and residents may not be 100%, but at least residents will actually know. Same obviously with Crestwood, which looks potentially to be an easier fix, as long as we can get the bins collected. That's my ward, but I do welcome the motion and the future dialogue.
Councillor Bicknell. Any further debate? Councillor Mann.
I'm glad we are talking about it. Going on for a long, long time now. Chestnut Close and that area. So we can get things sorted soon rather than keep carrying on for another 3 or 4 years.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Mr. Calverley. We now move to agenda item number 9, the guiding regeneration principles for East. So Natalie's here to now. Over to you, Natalie. Thank you.
Good evening. The principles
are the regeneration of Eastleigh Town Centre, partly to aid recovery from the pandemic, but also in terms of identifying a strategic position for the future of the town. They aim to give a strategic direction to delivery both in the short, medium and longer term, and have been developed in discussion with members of Cabinet. They're very much the first stage in a process of looking at the future of the town centre. They are to help shape our discussions and our engagement with stakeholders. Councillor Vaughan said, you've seen the presentation before, and obviously it's been circulated of the principles as they stand, with a very brief summary. So we have Principle 1, which is a great place to live, which is about the place, creating a place people want to be. Housing in the town as a way of creating homes, but also footfall and a buzz in the town centre. As we're aware, retail itself begins to decline. Principle 2 is about a great place to do business, and so it's supporting the economic development of the town, looking at what the economic picture of the town is, with, say again, declining retail. There will be other areas that people are looking for flexible space. For that sort of business venue. Principle 3 is a green town, looking at environmental sustainability, as well as kind of greening up, providing green spaces and kind of to nature. Principle 4 this is looking at the mixed reasons why people may come into a town centre, and they would like to access when they're there, particularly as a hub for local people. It's accessible, it's easy to get to, and therefore is an ideal place to focus those sorts of amenities. Principle 5 is well connected and accessible, and this is looking at our transport links, the way people access the town through both on foot and cycling, as well as through the car and public transport. And it's also looking at things in other ways as well. Principle 6 is a place where you want to spend time, and this is really about kind of dwell time, leisure, enhancing the offer that we already have and adding to that. Around creating the USP for the town that attracts people in, and it might be a number of things. It's the thing we need to understand what brings people into town centres in the new and kind of emerging post-COVID world. And this is very much about working together with our stakeholders, with our residents, and kind of understand what local people, local businesses want for the town centre, and helping us to kind of design the town that suits their needs. The next step for these principles is to seek endorsement by Cabinet later on in the month if the committee agrees. Use them to design and embed a kind of an action plan, so looking at kind of immediate things we need to do to improve the town, but also looking kind of longer term and at wider regeneration. So as I said, very much a starting point, and is your endorsement and agreement to the principles to enable us to kickstart this work around the future.
Thank you, Natalie. Are there any questions from councillors for Natalie? Councillor Tyson-Payne.
Sorry. Just wondered what you meant by strong leadership and how you envisage that leadership. So are you talking about, you know, the leader of the council, that's it, or is there something else you're talking about?
You might want a town centre it's around community leadership in terms of looking at what people want from the town. So yeah, it's not looking purely at partnerships.
Any further questions? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Tyson-Payne.
My computer's died again. If ModGovs gives up once more, I'm going to scream. So I suppose this was a question rather than a debate. Sorry. What's our timeline?
I haven't got one to be fair, because it depends on what we decide to do. So regeneration can be a number of things, and if we need to do a bit more of the action planning first and then the consultation, because if regeneration is relatively small scale, if it's public realm enhancements, if it's economic development kind of focus, a lot of that we can do in a relatively short space of time. If what comes out of it is a much kind of larger rescale regeneration for the town, then it's much, much longer term. So the first thing to do is do the action plan, which will help us get to kind of say the first points. So we need to sit down of what the end looks like, and therefore what the timescales are. So at the moment it's out. Don't know.
Can we have a timeline to be? So, yes. Like, I want to fly to the moon, but that's it. Yep.
That is fair. I would be putting my finger in the air rather than doing anything too dedicated at the moment, but we've got a group working on it at the moment. I would say we should be able to get an action plan, at least detailing the next steps. I'm looking at Guy now to check he's not going to kill me, but kind of within kind of 4 months or what a time frame would you say? Yeah. What we will do is we will come back to you and confirm. So we have an officers group. We have been working towards this point really. So we'll focus on the planning for the next stage, and then we'll come back to you to confirm that as soon as we can. But in terms of the plan for the plan, I would have thought around 4 to 5 months should be about right.
Thank you, Natalie. Yeah, it's this is very, very high level, and who wouldn't want this to be a great place to live and a great place to do business and a great green town, etc. So, something that will look at regenerating the town, especially the town centre. Investment, etc. So yeah, I'll definitely be supporting this. Okay, so we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Because of news that came to us late last week, this was published as a supplementary agenda item yesterday, and apologies for the short notice, but it was only the end of last week that we discovered that we were looking to extend the road closures under an experimental traffic. Unfortunately, Hampshire County Council said that once the national social distance guidance, then the roads must open because the road no longer exists. So I would like to propose an emergency motion calling on Hampshire County Council to support Eastleigh Borough Council by delegating authority to the Borough Council to introduce an experimental traffic order to maintain the road closures and associated changes to support the economic recovery of the town. This will also give us time to properly consult with residents and also get results of the Hampshire consultation, which we still haven't received. So to me, it just seems crazy to open the road straight away when we've got events planned to bring vibrancy and vitality to helping out local businesses. So I would appreciate it if I could have a second. Tyson Payne, thank you. Do we have any public participation? Okay. Councillor Bicknell.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to, for a number of reasons, some of which you've already mentioned yourself, Chair. To lift all restrictions on the 21st of June, whether they do or delay for a further 2 weeks, we'll have to wait and see for the next few days. But we have a very rare opportunity here. We know from surveys we've done ourselves, it would appear that from the public there is they are in favour of the High Street and Market Street being closed. It would also appear potentially that there are more traders that would actually want them open from stuff that we've had and the stuff that we've done. But the one thing we actually haven't done is we haven't been able to test under normal conditions, i.e. with no social distancing, literally gloves off, or actually it'd be masks off, and that, what would actually happen with High Street and Market Street closed under normal conditions. And that is something that would be very, very difficult to test. Moving forward, if, and it would depend on numerous consultations, we were to permanently close High Street and Market Street, it would be a very a big decision, one that we would have to make sure that we got right, one that we'd have to make sure that we got people behind us and what have you, but we wouldn't be able to test it. Understand why when the county did their consultation, I don't know what cabinet members at county do that has to be done on a specific day. So it does seem rather short-sighted from the county to be not sharing the results with us and giving us the opportunity to be able to test in a to do different things with their businesses. Highlight a lot of problems that we're not yet aware of. So there's a lot of stuff out there that we potentially don't know what works, what doesn't work, and how it works, and that, which you will only find out if you can test it in a live environment, i.e. after social distancing and what have you. And then at the same time, with you could be getting proper consultation, real-time data on footfall, because the other side of this as well, we know that footfall's going up at the moment. Well, it's hardly surprising people are allowed out, but actually what you would need to be able to do, and what you ought to be able to do, is with the streets closed, with what, and compare that back to, well, I was going to say last year, but that to actually see if it's making a difference. Sadly, people revert to old ways very quickly. So if you were to lift the restrictions on the 21st, then people would revert back to what they used to do, because that's just human nature, and you would never get that opportunity. So I think that it is short-sighted. I am aware that it doesn't just affect us; it affects the whole of Hampshire, and I think Hampshire County Council are just being short-sighted across the entire county. So I'm quite happy to support this for the reasons.
We've got Teresa from the bid, and if you've got any questions with regards to the traders represented by the bid, then please feel free to ask them. Councillor Irish.
Yeah, Councillor Bicknell's right. It does affect every town in Hampshire, but I believe Winchester have got some sort of dispensation. I don't quite understand what it is, whether it's worth us talking to Winchester City Council to see what they're actually doing, because they are affected by it, and I'm just wondering why they aren't affected by it, but every other town in Hampshire is. So is it worth talking to Winchester to find out?
We do know it's a different scheme, but I know that Clay can give you a
There are a number of schemes in Winchester that have been introduced over the past 18 months or so, one of which has been subject to a public consultation and is being delivered in line with the movement strategy, which has been done by the County Council jointly. And that scheme is proposed to remain. It hasn't been delivered under the COVID legislation, which we've used for the road closures in Eastleigh. Now, there are other areas within Winchester which have been removed where the social distancing restrictions are lifted. That should give us a bit more clarity. So Winchester have a number of schemes that are impacted.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, because I was a bit confused. Although I was aware of what was happening in Winchester, I was a bit confused with the actual details, so thank you for that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And I will say that I think involved will have a decision day on a particular day. And with my experience of the county, their decision days will not be changed, and they will happen on their decision days. It's sad, but that's the way it goes, I'm afraid.
Any questions for Teresa? I've got one. So there was a lot of, I won't say noise, there was a lot of opposition originally from a group who were against this. Have attitudes at the time, or is it still very entrenched?
A lovely, vibrant town centre with a proper road closure if it was a proper pedestrianisation. I think if you look at both ends, what happens during the evenings, you walk into it, it looks like roadworks. I think everyone would love it, areas to be pedestrianised, but not for it to be closed the way it is.
also the long-term aim is if it is decided that pedestrianisation is the way forward, that the road goes because it all gets levelled and you wouldn't know road there, and it'd be a lovely environment.
Just like the road precinct, that
Yeah.
whole area, marketplace, sorry.
Yeah.
A great space to do stuff.
Yeah, but it's been great seeing the outside cafe areas and you know, bar areas, and it has brought a vibrancy along, and it'd be such a shame to in traffic and park cars. Councillor Bicknell.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for that. That's really, really encouraging to hear you say that, because, as Councillor Vaughan said, we've done what we've done because of the legislation and what have you, and this is why I just think it's so important. Moving around and what have you. Is labour intensive for staff, and it's also hugely expensive on resources and capital to actually do it. And you've got to do it right, and therefore to do it right you've got to do it once. And to be able to do all that you need information, intel and data, which you can only get if the roads are shut. To get that data to lead you to those decisions. Consultation. At the moment that Hampshire will not let us use an emergency road to extend it for that reason and that, but there we go.
Sorry, I you misunderstood me. I don't think the road closure in its current way will help the business going forward.
No, I totally agree with you, but to get to where they would want, you have to go through a process, and that process, the best we can do at the moment is what we've got to get that data. You know, is footfall going to go up and what have you? Because if you're going to spend, you know, huge sums of money, you can't do that by sticking your finger in the air. You've got to have intel and data.
Permission to just be outside either. They can be outside sat down, but they can't be outside stood up. So, and also the selling of the alcohol. So I think I've got a meeting with the police at the end of June to see how we can take that forward into outside areas.
Thank you, Teresa. So there's any more. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you, councillors. That's unanimous. Thank you, Teresa. Councillors, we now need to consider our appointments to outside bodies. I think we've agreed by email, so I'll just remind everybody so that we can have a formal record. So it's the Eastleigh Borough Council and Test Valley Irish, Councillor Bicknell and Councillor Campbell. Age concern, Councillor Campbell. AWCA, Councillor Irish. The College Liaison, Councillor Bourne and Councillor Park. The Lakeside Users, Councillor Bicknell and Councillor Campbell. Pavilion on the Park, so the Eastleigh Youth. The Hub was Councillor Doogie and Councillor Park. And the University was Councillor Doogie. And also that we agree that we'll all be on the licensing subcommittee so that we can be called at any time. Although I believe that's conditional upon doing the training. another time because people can't all make it. Sorry, Councillor Doogie. Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I don't think I agree to that. I can't do that, because obviously it's daily, so...
You can't do what, sorry? Okay, but I'm just saying that you'll be on the panel, and a request will go out, and anyone who can make it. Okay, understood.
I'll just put on record as well that I won't be likely to attend. The 11 years I've been on the council, every year I've always said that I can't go on licensing because I'm not available.
Panel which is made up of every councillor on the council, and as Councillor Bourne says, you have to have done the training to be able to sit on a panel, and we only ever ask trained members if they will come and be on a panel because it's a legal requirement that you have training. Therefore, this is just one of those kind of essentially bureaucratic things that we have to do, is appoint everybody, but it will only be trained members upon.
Can I have a proposer? Councillor Bicknell, and a seconder, Councillor Park. Is there any debate? Unanimous.
I don't think we've got it here, actually. If we could have that circulated, because I think I know what I'm on, but I'd just like to know what's there.
No problem.
What's there, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, so now on to item 11, which is the financial management report. So I'd like to ask Guy to introduce the report. Thank you.
Introduction to this one, so shall I say that I'm happy to take any questions?
Councillor Bicknell, and a seconder, Councillor Irish. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's unanimous. Councillors, officers and members of the public watching, thank you for listening. The next meeting will be held on Tuesday the 14th of September at 7 p.m. Thank you very much and good evening.